Operation Kill Switch, Operation Flip the Switch. All sorts of special ATF operations are going on around the country focused on switches. And in Detroit, there's recently been a couple of absurd cases where they caught people on social media. Over a year ago, a guy who was a member of some crew called the Omerta Boys, he was fresh out of the pen. He got caught with something, and then he was fresh out the pen, and they immediately started following his social media because they saw he was still messing with guns.
23-year-old Trayvon Mathis, who got out of prison in 2021 for assault with intent to do great bodily harm and gun charges. Vanderplow says Mathis is once again in the gun game and hiding in plain sight, posting photos of himself with guns on Instagram.
I don't know, did they get on this guy? They were rappers, but they weren't particularly popular. So they get on this guy's social media right out after he gets out the pen. They get him again. And just the other day, it hit the crime in the D, Metro Detroit Crime News, whatever, wire, that another Omerta boy who should have learned his lesson from the other guy a year ago, apparently the feds just kept watching them. He went live with this gun. Now, of course, in America, you can have guns. They can't tell if you're a felon or not. But they can see that little bump, that little switch in the back. So he was on live. He only had 21 people watching, but apparently one of them was a federal agent because they came to his house and got him. So 2 Omerta boys caught on social media. And these are not guys that, I don't know what behind the scenes, why the feds were on them, that maybe they were out doing stuff. I don't know.
Unison heads to the house off Prevost near Margarita on Detroit's west side. Each agent carrying about $30,000 worth of equipment to keep them safe. That will get your attention. A disorienting flashbang, a visit from ATF agents busting up gang activity on Detroit's west side at 6 a.m.
Don't seem to have had some reputation as being involved in a bunch of crazy stuff, nor are they charged with a bunch of other crazy things. So I don't know why different people's name gets pulled out of the hat to get watched on social media. It could just be who's ever easiest, but believe me, all these law enforcement, including local law enforcement, as long as they're big enough, have dedicated social media personnel that are clocking in simply to look at social media feeds.
The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms took a look at Michigan and Detroit gun crime in 2021. The data shows that we had 12,324 gun crimes across the state, and the vast majority were in Detroit, more than 10 times that of Flint, the next closest city, and Pontiac had 377 in 2021. Detroit Crime Commission Chief Andy Arena looked at the numbers with us.
That's a lot of guns that were retrieved in the city of Detroit last year.
The 7,644 weapons confiscated in crimes accounted for 62% of the total gun crimes across the state, even though the census tells us the city only accounts for 6.5% of the state's population.
Where did they come from? Did they come from the suburbs? Did they come from out of state, right? But these were guns that were either used in a crime or were taken out of a vehicle or taken out of a law enforcement, ATF-led task force. They're out there doing their job, right? They're getting guns off the streets in the city of Detroit.
There's an Instagram page, I don't know if it disappeared now, it's called like Detroit Hits or something, and it had all this information about such and such killed such and such is in such and such gang, and he killed such and such. And I know there's a lot of pages like that, but this it was about details of cases of people you never heard of. Like, who was this person that would know all this stuff? Like, you couldn't know all this stuff because a lot of these people, these young guys that so-and-so in this gang killed such and such for his gym shoes and then wore them to a party, had to have been coming from law enforcement. And like maybe they had information on these cases, but they didn't know for sure, so they were putting it out there to see did people respond. So social media is the biggest organized crime opportunity in history, and it's also, very easy to get caught on there. And this whole switch thing is a high priority for the feds.
The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms took a look at Michigan and Detroit gun crime in 2021. The data shows that we had 12,324 gun crimes across the state, and the vast majority were in Detroit, more than 10 times that of Flint, the next closest city, and Pontiac had 377 in 2021. Detroit Crime Commission Chief Andy Arena looked at the numbers with us.
That's a lot of guns that were retrieved in the city of Detroit last year.
If you ever were curious about how so many damn people get shot on the weekends in Chicago or Detroit, sometimes they just had a weekend where 22 people were shot at one party, and you think, well, how the hell do that many people get shot and only one or two dies? It's because of these switches. So a real machine gun, assault rifle, AK, even a submachine Uzi, they have long barrels or somewhat long barrels, and they're built to absorb the recoil of rapid fire so that you can have some type of accuracy. I mean, even like a Uzi or a Mac-10 is meant for up close. It's meant to put 20 rounds in somebody that's, 6 feet away from you. Something with a barrel this long, you put a switch on it, it almost becomes, it's not a toy. Obviously, it still hurts you, but it's sort of like, you're losing any accuracy, maybe the first bullet, but you can't really possibly hold it steady, and that's why they're spraying everything. So what are you really trying to do with the switches? Is it just a fad? I mean, is it what? You heard about it in a rap song? Because it's making, if you're really out trying to do somebody, it's making it less accurate. It only takes 1 or 2 bullets to go in somebody's vital spots. What are you doing shooting 20 bullets in random directions? Are you just retarded? So look for there to be a tremendous crackdown. It's already starting. Like I said, Operation Kill Switch, Texas. Operation Flip the Switch, Birmingham, Alabama. All over the country, there's different federal ATF task force. And it looks like there's one in Detroit. They may not have announced it, but given all the arrests, so when the ATF looks at, or a federal prosecutor looks at a state and sees that a place that has 6% of the population, Detroit has 6% of Michigan's population and has, 70% of the gun crimes or whatever, might be time for a task force. So that's what they're doing. And now everybody's in some type of made-up gang now. So now that gives the federal prosecutors, in Detroit, every person that gets arrested, they say they're in some gang or crew. Though I do suspect a lot of those things are just loose affiliations that might be like they rap together or something. So they give themselves some type of name. But now you subject yourself to extra penalties possibly, to little RICO cases possibly.
A Detroit man facing new charges tonight. It all started with what federal agents saw on his Instagram.
Devin, there is oversharing on social media, and then there is oversharing on social media to the point that the ATF is knocking at your front door. As well as unlawful user of a controlled substance in possession of a firearm.
Oh, here's a guy in Pontiac that got caught with selling switches.
Jeremy Massey is already in hot water with the law. He has 2 outstanding court cases. ATF was monitoring Massey's Instagram, which went by various names, including East Baby Slim. On that account, Massey is seen posing, pointing, and sleeping with a Glock, as well as a series of photos showing his marijuana habit. He's now facing criminal charges of being in possession of a firearm while under indictment, as well as unlawful user of a controlled substance in possession of a firearm.
He got 97 months or something like that just for having it. You see, in this one, they charged the guy with drug use, whatever it just said, drug use in possession of a gun or drug user. Marijuana is still technically a federal crime. I mean, having one marijuana blunt is a federal crime. So if they want to get you off the street because you got guns or illegal gun modifications and you're on your Instagram smoking weed, they can rig you up with the charge. And it's legal, it's the law. You need to know the law. But it's like Grand Theft Auto out here. So, but they're cracking down on it. They're giving people, starting to give them lengthy prison terms, and they're displaying it all on social media. See, those Omerta boys, the one guy didn't learn from his own guy and his crew, and they caught him on social media too. 21 people watching, and one of them was a federal agent, apparently. So, in the young black population, they're calling them switches, but the middle-aged white men of America got something else called bump stocks. And actually under Trump did stop the sale of bump stocks, because remember in 2017 when Trump was first in office, or it's a year in, that crazy evil guy in Las Vegas took the lives of 50-some people at the country festival. So Trump said, well, you know, these guns that he had shouldn't, these modifications he had that allowed him to take out so many people shouldn't be legal. So bump stops were made illegal, and the feds were hitting people. Bump stops, unlike switches, which you have to get illegally in the mail, so it's always kind of an underground thing. Bump stocks were legal, and under Trump they got made illegal, but the Supreme Court just ruled like a month or two ago that they're in fact legal. So as they're cracking down on the modification, that the more of the urban population, African American population, Hispanic, is using the bump stocks that you can get at a gun store, well, they're back in effect. So the more the mainstream people that want to have a machine gun, I don't know why the ex-military and police to think there's going to be a civil war and they're prepping. But I didn't quite understand what a bump stock was, so I did some investigation, and it's kind of interesting. It's ingenious because it's illegal to have a machine gun, right? That's why the switch thing is illegal. But what the bump stock does, so you got an AR-15, say, and it's got the stock, that goes against your shoulder. So you take that off and you replace it with a bump stock, which, I guess the easiest way to describe it, it's like a hollow version of a stock, right? So the gun goes in, so the gun isn't stationary. It jerks back and forth into the bump stock like a piston, right? You pull the trigger and it jerks back and forth like a piston. But the way the bump stock's set up, because it's taking the momentum and bouncing it back and forth, you just pull the trigger one time and hold your finger, and it jumps back and forth so many times, it makes the gun fire almost as rapidly as a machine gun. But because you're only pulling the trigger once yourself, and the gun is like using its momentum against your finger to fire over and over, it doesn't violate the machine gun statute. So bump stocks are legal. They're cracking down on switches in these, starting off in cities where they've had incidents.
Well, listen to this. This is a device the size of a Lego. It's become a clear and present threat to our communities.
And today, federal agents showed us how machine gun conversion devices can actually transform handguns into powerful killing devices. These devices.
So they're coming from Russia, they're coming from China, and they're coming in the mail. It is crazy to think that a device the size of a kid's toy is causing carnage. Well, the ATF is working with the U.S. Postal Inspectors and Homeland Security to stop these conversion devices from being delivered. If anyone is caught, they will be federally prosecuted. So far, 2 offenders have been sentenced. One is serving 7.5 years in prison.
And the whole gun thing and the way they trace things is interesting. There's only about, I don't know, 2,500 ATF field agents. So that's why people are able to get away with a lot of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if the ATF gets expanded. America, apparently law enforcement has given up on trying to stop D-rugs. But D-rugs they're somewhat correlated with violence, but what people really want stopped is killing. All the killing. So, wouldn't be surprised if the ATF gets expanded, but as of right now, they focus on different cities. Looks like Detroit is one of them right now, given all these cases they're making and that they have the manpower to sit on social media. Houston has one, different, there's quite a few of them, and they move around, and they may not always necessarily divulge when they're coming to your town. I did do a story maybe 18 months back. The feds announced they were going to crack down in northwest and northeast Detroit, the 8th and the 9th precinct, which they did. They got probably some grant money for guns, but that's different from an actual ATF task force. My good friend's little brother just got, it wasn't little, he's 30-some years old. He just got a very extensive sentence. I think he got, what did he get, 20 to 40 or something? And as best we can figure out, because we don't understand even with the incident, his brother and his boy were, well, according to the police story, were like robbing another guy for some guns, and they all had all these guns, but yet none of them had any, that we know of, had any place stable to live at. None of them owned a car. They just got all these guns, and they're just out shooting each other. And not saying you should get a gun to sell drugs or that you should sell drugs or do anything like that, but just having guns for no reason and just floating around and being violent is pretty scary. That's always been going on, but easier and easier gun access, and they will punish you if they catch your gun in a crime such as there was a Detroit police officer taken out last summer maybe, and they just gave the guy, so it was a very young guy with mental illness that did it, and there was a little bit of an older guy who bought the gun for him at a regular store, and they just gave him 2 years for that.
A gun stolen from the Detroit police 10 years ago has turned up, and wait till you hear how authorities actually got their hands on it. Investigators say Darnell Danner sold several firearms, including the stolen DPD gun, to an undercover federal agent. You could see the scratches around the circled Detroit PD markings, which investigators believe was his attempt to remove it. Danner didn't have the gun registered to him. Investigators are accusing him of dealing guns without a license and possessing a stolen firearm.
And finally, oddly, another investigation, a guy sold an undercover agent a firearm that was once upon a time a Detroit police gun, and it had the stuff scratched off on it. I'm sure they're giving him a hard time to find out where that came from. There's a surprising number of police firearms that float around. A lot of activity from the ATF. They seem to be in southeast Michigan or in Michigan period, but definitely focused on Detroit. So stay off of social media. Don't play with switches. Out profit American dope.